Hi, my name's James and welcome to my shop. This is my first woodworking video. I've been watching a lot of them lately and thought I'd give it a try. Today I'm going to be making some end grain cutting boards, the woodworker's standby gift, as it's getting pretty close to Christmas and I'd like to cross a few names off my list. I have a stash of lumber here that I'm planning on using to make different cutting boards. I've got some hard maple, some cherry, and some American black walnut. What I'm going to do first is just chop them up to length to make them a little easier to handle before I run them through the jointer and the planer. I'll just check that the joiner's fence is 100% square before starting to mill any of my lumber over here at the jointer. I use a Wixie gauge, which I set to 0 on the bed, then lift up onto the fence to check that the angle is 90 degrees. Once I've dialed in the fence angle, I'll go ahead and make sure that the joiner is set up to take light passes, but not too light because I'm not that patient. I'll start the dust collection and I'll send a few boards through. Now that I've flattened the faces, I'll put the face up against the fence and make this edge square to the face before running it through the planer. Now that my lumber has a smooth and flat end, and a smooth and flat face, which are at perfect 90 degrees to each other, I'll send them through the thickness planer to get them down to the right size for the cutting board. As you can see, this maple was just a little bit too wide for my jointer, and it left a little mark here, a little raised area which didn't go over the cutter head. What I'm going to do is just throw a clamp on it and take off this edge with my Veritas apron plane. This is a time where I really wish I had a nice big bench with a tail vise, but maybe I'll build one of those in a future video. Now that we've got our stock flat, square, and to the right thickness, it's time to rip it to width and glue it up to get that nice checkerboard pattern that we're looking for in our end grain cutting boards. I'm just going to turn on the dust collection and run these boards through. Now that we've got all of our lumber ripped to the appropriate width for our design, we'll flip it over and apply glue, clamp it up, and let it sit overnight. As you can see from the edges of this wood, especially the maple, I have a general purpose blade installed in my saw. My purpose-built ripping blade is at the blade sharpening place, and I neglected to pick it up today. I thought I could get by with a general purpose blade, but I would be in much better shape if I had waited and picked up my ripping blade. We'll add a little bit of Titebond 2 or Titebond 3. Most people prefer Titebond 3, but this happens to be what I have in the shop today. And clamp these together and leave them to set up overnight. At this point in the process, we'll end up with a blank like this, which we'll just send through the planer to flatten it out. At this point in the process, I have a blank that measures 1 5/8" by 1 5/8" squares, and I'm going to cut it to 1 5/8". I'm just going to use my miter gauge first to square up the corner here, square up the board, and then I'm going to cut the strips to 1 5/8". Now that our blank is cleaned up on this edge, nice and straight, we'll set the fence to 1 5/8". And cut it into strips again. Now that our blank is chopped up into sections here, we're going to flip it over to expose the end grain. And every second piece, we're going to rotate 180 degrees to get our checkerboard pattern. Now there are a few defects in the lumber that I used, so I'm just going to go ahead and try to find a way to get the best side out of the lumber. I'll just go through each slot here and find the best side. Just make sure that it's up. After unclamping our block, which is now basically the pattern that we want, plus a few burn marks, which we're going to try and sand off here in a minute, we'll be able to set this down in the drum sander and sand it smooth, flattening out the board for the final time. Now I'll just square up the cutting board here at the table saw, taking off these rough edges, and then sand, 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 and then time for finish. And now the part I warned you about in the last step. Once we're through the drum sander with 100 grit, we're going to start with 80 on the random orbit sander, move up to 120, 180, and 240. This is my least favorite part of the process, but when we're done, it looks beautiful. And now for one of the last steps, I'm going to apply some handholds at the router table.